Hi, I'm Mark Birch, and today I'm going to explore the expository section of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Chapter 10. Despite the terrible pain caused by transformation, Jekyll's narrative voice conveys the simplicity of the process, describing the way in which drinking the potion would allow him to doff the body of the noted professor. The verb doff is usually employed to refer to the removal of an item of clothing, something simple and common. And this concept developed through the simile of Edward Hyde being like a thick cloak, a means of disguising the persona, as well as something pleasurable and comforting to wear. The motif of Hyde as a form of clothing is developed still further in the metaphor my impenetrable mantle. A mantle can act as a synonym for a cloak. Again, it represents the way in which Hyde performs the function of a disguise, and one that's impossible to uncover given that it's impenetrable. Jekyll refers to the pleasures that he wished to indulge in as undignified. However, these are the desires of Jekyll, mitigated by the good aspect of his character. In the uninhibited guise of Hyde, they turned toward the monstrous. Hyde would satisfy himself with what Stevenson described as bestial avidity. Once again, Hyde is dehumanized, and his passions are compared to those of an animal. His relentless pursuit of self-interested desires is conveyed through the simile like a man of stone. Like stone, he's unmoved by any of the negative effects of his desires upon others. Jekyll is startled by waking one morning to discover that he's been transformed into Hyde without taking the potion. Jekyll believes that spending time as Hyde has exercised and nourished his evil aspect, to the point that the body of Edward Hyde had grown in stature. He's concerned that he's losing hold of my original self and becoming slowly incorporated with my second and worse. This fear is conveyed through the simile like the Babylonian finger on the wall. The simile is a biblical allusion to Daniel chapter 5 verses 1 to 31. Here a hand sent by God writes a prophecy of doom on the wall of the king's palace. Stevenson suggesting that Jekyll recognises his own doomed fate. The unsolicited transformation is the writing on the wall for Jekyll. Jekyll recognises that he must make a choice and considers the merits of both of his personas. He claims that Hyde remembers him as the mountain bandit remembers the cavern in which he conceals himself from pursuit. Like the cloak image previously employed, the sense is one of Jekyll's form acting as a disguise, concealing the evil deeds conducted in the form of Hyde. Jekyll's represented as a place of safety, the cavern in which a bandit hides, while Hyde is merely identified as an uncivilized figure of wrongdoing, the mountain bandit. Stevenson employs antithetical parallelism in order to highlight the contrasting attitudes of Jekyll and Hyde to each other. Jekyll had more than a father's interest, Hyde had more than a son's indifference. The immaturity of Hyde and his lack of care are highlighted through the familial comparisons. Jekyll decides to opt for his own persona and maintains this for 2 months, but he gives in to his desires, once again drinking the potion. This time he states that the devil had been long caged. He came out roaring. The zoomorphic representation of Hyde is used once again to capture his bestial nature. Now his behaviour is driven to even further excesses as a result of his confinement. It's at this point that Hyde murders Sir Danvers Carew. Jekyll's account states, I struck in no more reasonable spirit than that in which a sick child may break a plaything. Again, the immaturity of Hyde is foregrounded. The horror of Hyde's actions is conveyed through the description, with a transport of glee I mauled the unresisting body, tasting delight from every blow. The zoomorphic nature of Hyde's actions are represented by the verb mauled, while the sadistic juxtaposition of pleasure and extreme violence renders the action deeply disturbing. Jekyll now recognises that being confined to the better part of my existence is a necessity rather than a choice. Once again, the form of Jekyll functions as a place of safety. Just as this had been described as a cavern for the mountain bandit, Jekyll was now my city of refuge. This was the period described in the opening of chapter 6. However, after some time, Jekyll describes how the lower side of me, so long indulged, so recently chained down, began to growl for licence. Jekyll cannot free Hyde for fear of the murder charge levelled against Hyde, but the ominous use of the zoomorphic growl indicates that Jekyll's base desires are rising. Jekyll gives in to temptation in his own form, rather than that of Hyde, but this, he claims, destroyed the balance of my soul. While sitting in the park, the animal within me licking the chops of memory, Jekyll's pleasure in the memory of his past indulgences initiates an unwanted transformation. Stevenson follows this with an account of chapter 9, but from Jekyll's narrative perspective. Jekyll moves from a first-person account to third-person. Hyde, in danger of his life, was a creature new to me. Stevenson presents Jekyll as so disgusted by Hyde's behaviour that he explicitly distances himself from this aspect of his persona through both the narrative shift and the dehumanisation. It's only after the narrative shift that Jekyll states, "He, I say, I cannot say I." Hyde's described through the frequently employed diabolical motif, child of hell, and the extreme nature of his behaviour is conveyed through his response to a female match seller. He smote her in the face. From this point, Jekyll is only able to retain the form of Jekyll by a great effort, as of gymnastics, and by increasingly frequent and potent doses of the drug. Jekyll thought of Hyde as of something not only hellish, but inorganic. Hyde is dehumanised to such an extent in Jekyll's mind that he's rendered unliving. The chromomorphic Hyde is the slime of the pit, or the amorphous dust. Yet it's profoundly disturbing to Jekyll that this lifeless thing can utter cries and has sinned. It's the disturbing paradox of the lifeless living. Jekyll's account explains that the salt used to form his potion must have been impure, and it was that unknown impurity which lent efficacy to the draught. He's represented as writing the statement that constitutes the final chapter of the novella under the influence of the last of the old powders. When it runs out, Jekyll will die, for he cannot return. Jekyll ponders whether Hyde will be hung or will take his own life. Stevenson's careful structuring of the novel has previously revealed the answer to this question in chapter 8, when Utterson discovers the body of Hyde. And so, with the end of Jekyll, the novella ends. Okay, ta.